Hey, it's Harry. You're about to listen to Building, the podcast charting our journey to starting 1225, the audience first growth marketing agency. We want our podcast to be a very open and transparent look around the journey of starting an agency. And you're about to listen to one of the very first episodes where we haven't even decided the agency name, so you'll notice that does not get mentioned throughout these early episodes. We hope you enjoy listening.
So in terms of the actual substance of what you guys are putting out, I think it's really, really good, to be honest. I think the obvious criticism would be, can we increase the production value of it? Because I guess the biggest value of a podcast and where the reach is going to come from is how can you cut that up, put it onto social media and portray it in a 30-second, 1-minute format. So I guess that's probably your next step, and I don't know how hard that is for you guys to achieve, but I think it's a great idea. I'm surprised more people aren't doing it. Everything that I'm doing is what is the story here. So obviously you guys have quit your jobs, and I think that's the instant hook of we quit our jobs to follow our dream of doing this and this, and the other idea of trying to be the fastest scaling or whatever. You really think about what your hook is and what's your unique thing. Whenever you're telling a story, obviously that catches the most important thing, but what it has to do is has to have an end goal, and every single piece of content has to be serving to that. So I guess one thing would be to think about what's your one line that you would say at the start of every single video in name of this is the journey that you're following.
Brendan and I have been working together for a long time, so what we've been able to really do is divide and conquer on that responsibility. And one of the things that we've introduced in more recent episodes of the podcast, which is how we do everything really day to day, is think about incrementality. So how do we shift the needle a little bit every day to ultimately get to where we want to be? And at the moment we're counting down to July to our launch. So on the podcast, we do weekly commitments. So what are the 1 to 3 things that we're going to achieve in that week to move us forward? And we can essentially split that down into 3 pillars. So we have the sales side of things, we have the marketing side of things, and then we have the operational side of things.
Hello and welcome to episode number 5. The recording date is the 25th of April 2023. And welcome to Building. So that's our name for our podcast. And this podcast is charting our journey to setting up a new growth marketing agency. I'm under pressure today because this is a very special podcast, as we're joined by our very first guest. Harry, do you want to take that away and intro?
Yeah, I'll take it from here. So we're joined by, I guess, our first and so far only listener of the podcast in George. George is a professional videographer who I guess we met in a bit of a different way than perhaps you would normally network in the industry. George actually dog sitted for my dog after I found him online, which it's less weird than it sounds. But after that, I think we got talking. You mentioned, George, that you're doing some video work, and ever since you kept me across your work. So yeah, we thought we'd get you on and just ask for some feedback from a professional rather than us 2 idiots who are trying to start a podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely a weird meeting up through dog sitting, but I'm a big believer in sort of things happen for a reason, and you end up meeting the right people at the right time. When I was first dog sitting, I was just left my job and I guess I was sort of in a similar position you guys were, where you quit your job and you just put yourself in a risky situation where you're like, right, I'm going to have to actually make this work. So I was just dog sitting, just sort of keep things ticking over, because you can work while you're dog sitting. So it's sort of a nice pastime. So, if the agency doesn't kick off straight away, maybe it's something you guys could consider.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Brendan, we've got enough space in what will be the new office. Maybe get a couple of dogs in there and earn a bit on the side.
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, I was going to say, George, what you've done really is you've sent us, like I said, you've kept me across your work from then when you were first dog sitting and working, I guess, not necessarily as your full-time gig, because you're obviously doing the dog sitting as well, all the way to where you are now. And before you jumped on, I actually did a tiny bit of research and watched back some of those first show reels that you sent me versus the work that you're doing now. And you can see the progression there as well. So like, you're absolutely killing it. I think maybe platform for you to maybe give like a quick overview of some of the work that you've been doing recently, because as I said, like it is first class.
Sure, I appreciate that so much. Well, at the minute, I've been doing a lot of work on employer branding, which has been a really, really interesting thing. I think obviously you guys are going to a marketing agency element. Employer branding sort of is now becoming sort of its best friend, really holding its hand, because how you show off the culture within is now becoming much more external thing to attract I know that's something I'm spending so much time working on, figuring out. But then alongside that, I think it's the social media elements of things. As a videographer, you sort of have to adapt in this in sort of modern age, because when it comes to creating an about us video for a website, whatever, they're very much one-off things that everyone can do. So in terms of sort of specializing, I've been looking really much more into TikTok, into podcasting, definitely an interesting element as well. And sort of, all these different growth channels where you can show yourself off in a more transparent light. Like what you're doing now is the transparency element. I think a lot more people are starting to click onto. You need to be taking people who are going to be interested in buying your product on a journey with you. They're not just going to buy it because it's a good product necessarily. They've got to understand the journey for it. And obviously then there's just other things like the organic reach that's possible on TikTok is now ridiculous. But really it always comes down to great storytelling. And as a videographer, I almost feel like it's sort of my job to be good at that. And I think that's sort of one of being the biggest areas of growth within my career that sort of helps me get into rooms that otherwise I wouldn't, had I not committed to posting on TikTok. I've got 10,000 followers now, which isn't massive, but it's not been through a massive amount of work either. And got to work with brands like Dr. Martens and stuff. And so just for anyone who might be listening to this podcast, the idea that growing your personal brand and spending a bit of time on it could get you into those sorts of rooms is definitely an interesting prospect.
I wouldn't do yourself down on that 10,000 number either. As I mentioned at the start, we've got one listener so far in yourself. So I'd certainly take 10,000 at this stage. So let's get into the reason you're here. We've mentioned it a few times that you've had a listen to the first couple of episodes. As Brendan mentioned, we're on episode 5 now. So we've progressed a few more from there. And the stat that I love to bring up is, according to the BBC, like 75% of podcasts that are started don't get past the 3rd episode. So in my view, you're on a top 25% podcast purely based on the numbers. But yeah, lay it on us. What's the feedback you have so far?
For sure. I think the number to get to past 20 is like 1% or something. So, not much further to go. But from my first opinions, I've edited so many podcasts that have been filmed on a Zoom. And everyone says they've got this great idea, and you watch it and you don't feel like there's much substance there. I don't think that's what I found watching you guys. I think I probably am the target audience for what you guys are trying to put out, to be honest, in terms of being interested in how businesses grow. And I think your ability to, you can clearly see the relationship you guys have with each other. And I think the one that really interested me was just before you went into the meeting to say you were actually going to leave, handing in your notice, and how you managed to portray this sense of, I'm actually really fucking nervous about what's going to happen, and I don't know how it's going to go down. And I think you can really feel that. So in terms of the actual substance of what you guys are putting out, I think it's really, really good, to be honest. I think the obvious criticism would be, can we increase the production value of it? Because I guess the biggest value of a podcast and where the reach is going to come from is how can you cut that up, put it onto social media and portray it in a 30-second, 1-minute format. So I guess that's probably your next step. And I don't know how hard that is for you guys to achieve, but I think it's a great idea. I'm surprised more people aren't doing it. And I think this is sort of, the podcast is almost like one aspect of how you can be super transparent with how your journey is growing, right? Like a podcast is easy because it's not easy, but you can book it in and you confirm each week we're going to be doing this. But I think there's other elements which I mentioned in an email, but also I'll talk about it here, where things are less scripted and more just documentative of what's actually going on. Like I'm sure if I sat with you guys in a meeting every single day, or we're working together in a room every single day while you're trying to build this business, I would film something that was pretty intense, like a massive win that you've just signed your first client, or a massive loss that things aren't going to plan. So in terms of increasing that transparency, it'd be great to see more of a, I guess, fly on the wall content, more like boardroom style filming content from that side of things, and then definitely a vertical format of some sort of weekly vlog on what you guys are working with on TikTok or something. But yeah, overall thoughts, I'm loving it.
I think we'll take that, Brendan.
Yeah, definitely. That's a win in my book.
So I guess we're fairly transparent of what we're really good at and what we're not so good at. And from our perspective, like the strategy part of content is certainly something that we hang our hats on. And in fact, primarily what we haven't given too much detail yet, but what the agency is going to be based upon. Where we are also transparent, hence the nature of this podcast, is where we know we have weaknesses or where we need to be working with other people, right? Ultimately, what makes an agency so powerful is the sum of its parts, not an individual or two individuals running the thing at the top, which is a terrible phrase in itself. But we do know that we're going to need support when it comes to the video side of things and how to be transparent to our target audience, which you're right, you fit into. So give us some tips, right? So let's say we are going to explore this further. We're going to double down on the video side of things. Maybe we are going to look at vlogging or increasing the production value and things like that. Aside from, of course, employing yourself, like what other tips can you give us to really help elevate things?
I think it's really tempting for a videographer to say that production value is super important. I think we're actually becoming in a world where it's less so. The only reason I say it from your element of a podcast is if you guys were in a room together and be able to film that, then it'd be way easier to create those social clips. And I guess it just gives you a bit more authority when you are posting it, rather than these are two guys just sat in their bedrooms. It's two guys who are in an office, or even I mentioned just being in a lounge, like a more relaxed environment where it's actually almost just feels like you're talking to your friends who are sort of debriefing about their day. But I think it's really is building a story behind your brand. So for example, I've learned a lot from when I was employed with a company called Hagley West, and the owner guy called Tim Hayden. He's now got 1 million followers on TikTok, and he started working with a guy called Chris Gale, obviously a big cricketer, if you guys are cricket fans, and he essentially employed him. He gave him a certain percentage of the business, not necessarily because he thought Chris Gale was going to get massive sales for him, but it was the journey of getting Chris Gale on board. So Tim was just a small business owner in a small village in Northamptonshire, manages to network with Chris Gale by turning up to his hotel, meeting him at the hotel and telling him he's got this great idea, he wants him to invest. Then documents the story of how he's managed to keep chasing up and getting Chris Gale on board with his brand. And I only mention that because it's just the idea of he's now no longer just some guy sat in his kitchen building a clothing brand or building a watch brand. Sorry, he's now a guy who just got this awesome story behind how he's got Chris Gale with it, building a watch brand, and it's instantly more interesting. It's something that I think about even with everything that I'm doing is what is the story here. So obviously you guys have quit your jobs, and I think that's instant hook of we've quit our jobs to follow our dream of doing this and this, and the other idea of trying to be the fastest scaling or whatever. You really need to think about what your hook is and what's your unique thing. Whenever you're telling a story, obviously that catches the most important thing. But what it has to do is has to have an end goal, and every single piece of content has to be serving to that. So I guess one thing would be to think about what's your one line that you would say at the start of every single video in name of this is the journey that you're following. So it could be anything. I don't want to butcher what you guys are doing, but hi, we're Harry and Brendan. 2 months ago, we quit our job, gave ourselves no excuses to try and build the fastest growing marketing agency in the UK, for example. And that sounds pretty exciting to me. I'm sure there's other sort of elements you can add to that and make it even more exciting. But essentially, yeah, that's the one thing I start thinking about, and definitely be having a vertical vlog or something. But has to be. I think TikTok has to be your sort of first strategy alongside the podcast, I believe.
Nice. There's a few takeaways there. First of all, like I love like that instant hook at the start of every video. I think that is something that 100% first we can add, and also Brendan, something that we spent a lot of time in the last week discussing and really getting into. So love that idea. There are two other takeaways from my side there. One of which is, Brendan, this sounds like a good opportunity to start recording this podcast at a pub. I think like there is a nice thread there of George, you pick up on it, like debriefing. So like we could run that on like a Thursday or a Friday, debrief in the week. Have we achieved the things that we wanted to achieve? What have the wins been in that week? What have the losses been in that week? And obviously that will become scaled, if you like, or on a whole new level when we do eventually announce this thing. So from July, when we're running this day in, day out, like there'll be a nice debriefing story to that. And the second part is maybe we need a celebrity endorsement. We've seen a few of these, right? Like it seems to be the thing. What Mint Mobile just sold, which was Ryan Reynolds' thing. The Rock's got his tequila. KSI's got Prime. Maybe we need to go find a celebrity to endorse our thing as well.
I just think in terms of putting you on the right track of thinking is a little bit about me. So obviously I do my videography full time, but I have a clothing brand on the side that's sort of for small upcoming creatives. One of the goals is to get Slow Tie, who's a local rapper, to wear the t-shirt. Anyone listening to this probably thinks it sounds pretty silly, but one of the ideas I'm toying with at the minute is, you know how someone might comment every single day on a footballer's post about day one of commenting to get a signed shirt, for example. Well, that's what gave me the idea of why don't I do something crazy like day one of doing insane things to get slow ties to wear my clothing brand, and it could be things like me skydiving, could be me, I don't know. I'm thought exactly what the crazy things are, but in terms of if he then wore that, it's then someone to follow along, go, bloody hell, what the hell is this guy doing? He's a bit mad. And then two, when they actually achieve it, if I achieve it, then they've sort of come on that journey with me. They've instantly got some sort of relationship with me. I've now gone from madman doing all these crazy things, getting to wear my t-shirt, to now I've got slow tie wearing my t-shirt, and now I'm an actual clothing brand sort of thing. And it gives the brand that story forever, doesn't it? So it's just that sort of thought process. I don't know if whether you've got clients that you're eyeing up, and it's like day one of trying crazy things to find our dream clients, and it's you. I don't know what it could be. Sending off a message in a pigeon or whatever. Who knows? But
that I really love that. I can see that working really well for exactly what you want to achieve. But this is where the planner in me kicks in. Like, okay, like how many days is that going to take? Like, at what point does this go beyond the line for you, and you end up doing something really crazy when you're on like day 250 or something?
For sure.
But no, that is a great idea. Okay, look, final question for you then. To wrap up, you can give anybody listening one piece of advice. When it comes to video, starting out on their journey, right? So would that be TikTok, a podcast, whatever it may be? What's the one piece of advice you'd want to leave people with?
Storytelling over production value, always. And it always comes down to story. I think it's as simple as that. Just spend hours just researching how a good storyteller tells a story. Because it's not like it's a thing we don't know how to do. There's a clear structure on how to do it. So I think it's definitely something worth spending your time learning. Can I just flip the podcast around and ask you guys a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, for you at the minute then, so since you've quit, what does a day look like? How are you guys splitting your tasks, and what's the priority in terms of actually kicking this thing off and getting your clients in?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So for a bit of context, as hopefully people following along know, we have like a 3-month period here where we're essentially working 2 jobs. So we have our jobs at our current agency where we're seeing out our notice periods, which is an incredibly challenging time because it's like having to slowly step back from that, but still wanting to be involved after it. Like I've been there 6 years, Brendan's been there 5 years. Like it's really hard to take that step back. At the same time, then trying to shift that mindset and focus to this. So essentially we've got 1 job during the day, 1 job during the evening at the moment. But Brendan and I have been working together for a long time. So what we've been able to really do is divide and conquer on that responsibility. And one of the things that we've introduced in more recent episodes of the podcast, which is how we do everything really day to day, is think about incrementality. So how do we shift the needle a little bit every day to ultimately get to where we want to be? And at the moment, we're counting down to July to our launch. So on the podcast, we do weekly commitments. So what are the 1 to 3 things that we're going to achieve in that week to move us forward? And we can essentially split that down into 3 pillars. So we have the sales side of things, we have the marketing side of things, and then we have the operational side of things, where again, we kind of have natural skill sets there. Like I very much really enjoy the operational side of things. So I love getting deep into spreadsheets and the running of those kind of things. Brendan, you have a natural tendency to sell really well. And we're really pulling on those pillars. So Brendan will come onto this later on in the episode, that we're starting to have some positive sales conversations. So our main priority right now is we've set our target of having 2 to 3 contracted retainers by the time we launch in July. So we're essentially out of full-time employment into working with our clients day to day. And we've got a 2.5-month window now to make that happen. So it's very much focused on sales, which again presents its own challenges, Brendan. I'm sure you'll agree, in the sense of we can't openly talk about our thing yet. So not trying to sell without marketing is very difficult. But Brendan, hopefully you'll agree that it's going as well, if not slightly better than we could have hoped for at this stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been kind of a couple of wins, George. You talked about like kind of racking up the wins earlier on, and it feels like that. It's like, is this the right kind of move for us? Like we need some justification, and just small wins, like former contacts actually replying to emails and like, oh yeah, like starting a conversation and getting calls booked in. We've had a couple of those now. So it just, every time that happens, you get filled with a bit of confidence, like, oh, okay, yeah, we can do this, we can do that. So it's definitely on that approach. And we're learning at the same time. We don't know everything. The takeaways you've given us for the podcast, like next episode, when you listen in, you'll see a nice fancy new intro to it, for instance. So, and that's really important. But also the day-to-day with the tasks, like we'll set ourselves like, okay, we're going to get 25 target accounts each done this week. We're taking a step back and saying, okay, let's break it down even more. Like we're going to try and average 5 a day instead. Just little things like that actually help us to move forward on that front as well. So, there's loads to do and different priorities, certain bits like, when are we going to start the website, for instance? When are we going to do the boring stuff like VAT registration and stuff like that? So it's all in the plans, but it's getting the time and carving that out, because essentially I'm in the more day-to-day side of things at the current job. So I'm still kind of working all the time. And then like from 4 o'clock onwards, it's like, okay, switch over to E&G and get that bit and piece done. Sometimes you're just knackered from the day as well. So this is going to be the most intense kind of 3-month period we ever face as well. So it's going to be a challenge, but one that I'm looking forward to.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, nice. Thank you, man. We'll leave it there, but maybe in a year's time when we're absolutely smashing it, we'll get you back on and we can talk about that increase in production value and all those tips that you've given us.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Mate, that was a really interesting kind of discussion with George there. Like, I'm keen to pick his brains more. It's clear that he knows what he's talking about, and I think he's going to be a very valuable asset to us, especially during the launch window. So I'm looking forward to working with George more. It wasn't as scary as possible. Maybe that's because he wants to work with us, so he's not going to slate us and insult us with the way that our podcast is going currently. But moving on to the next segment of this podcast, it's our weekly status update. And first point on the agenda is sales conversations. Harry, how are you getting on with any sales?
I think similar to last week, not as well as you. You're definitely working those irons a bit better than I am, unlike we're on the golf course. But I think things are going as well, if not slightly better than perhaps we'd hoped. We have, between us, outreach to a couple of, I would describe them as colder contacts, very much historic contacts we've had within the industry that maybe we haven't spoken to for a couple of years. So the objective there was really to just get replies. As we were mentioning to George just now, it's really hard to build that momentum as much as we'd like to when we can't openly market as well. So it is a bit more of a behind the scenes approach, working those existing contacts. But I've got a proposal for us to be working on. So we'll be starting that this week, which is good. It's a bit of it's not a shot in the dark. Like we do have a good in there in terms of an internal champion, but the budgets that they have previously spent on agencies versus where we want to be and the opportunity we know we can take, it is a bit of a leap for them, but it's good practice for us. I am confident in the value that we could add to their business as well. So if we can get that right, it's a great opportunity. But Brendan, I know pretty much when you've not been speaking to me this week, you've been speaking on the sales front to people. So it's probably best I hand to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is kind of existing contacts, people that we've kind of worked with in our career over the past 10, 15 years. Had a good couple of conversations and progress as well. They want some proposals. So it's over the next couple of weeks. With all the other tasks that we've got to do to set up, we're now going to be kind of digging in and putting proposals together. It's interesting as well. We don't want to undervalue ourselves, but also we're confident in ourselves and our product. So a lot of the kind of initial work, we're suggesting that we do it for a cut price or kind of for free to get our foot in that door to then sign them up to the retainers. We're also asking for testimonials from existing clients as well. So that helps build that kind of story and that social proof on the website. But the one thing that I've learned from these sales conversations, and it kind of highlights how important it is, build relationships, network, build, maintain relationships. Some of these guys I haven't spoken to for, 5 years. They remember me from the work that I did previously for them. And that's why they're keen to get back in discussions. But it's shown me that that's the biggest lesson I've learned in sales over this past few months, maintain your relationships with people. Like, you never know when opportunities or new situations, like setting up a new agency, might call. Like, make sure it's a win-win for both sides. But yeah, that's really opened my eyes, and it's something that we've obviously been banging on about at Area, kind of build broader, deeper relationships and so on. I fully get it now. I fully get it. So that's one thing that I've learned there. So sales-wise, progress, confidence building is good. We're going to get knocked back, I'm sure, but at the moment, it's very positive. Let's move on to our target account list. This is it's probably the most vital piece of work that we do from a sales front, but also the most kind of, I don't want to underpin it by being negative about it, but it is quite a laborious process, finding contacts and bits and pieces like that. So we committed to 25 last time. My status update, I added 7 last night. So I'm just going to break it down and kind of catch up gradually over time, because if you do it in a large chunk, it's painful.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think we're in a similar position last week, where the week was perhaps busier than we had anticipated from a, I guess, full-time work position, which kind of naturally just bled into the evening. So we probably didn't get as far ahead as we wanted to. I think I did maybe 5 last week. Had a good crack at the start of this week. So obviously we're recording on a Tuesday today. So yesterday I managed to get, I think, 7 or 8 in as well. So we are making progress. But I think, as you said, like with everything that we're doing, let's just focus on that incrementality. So if we do 1, 2, 3, 5 a day, keep going, we'll get to where we need to be. We obviously set ourselves the objective of having 100 per vertical by the time we launch. We're well on our way to that. We don't actually, at the moment, within our spreadsheet, a bit of a flaw is that it's not tracking how many target accounts we have. So today I'll work on a formula to get that in, so we can track per vertical how many we're getting. But I think as per the theme of this podcast, it's building, right? We're getting that momentum there. So we're traveling in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. And then on to the final kind of top priority, I would say, at this current period. It's building that brand story, which will then inform everything from our website to the design and everything. We've got a second draft back from the brand story from Jack, who we're working with. He's going to be our second podcast guest in the next couple of weeks. What did you think to the second draft? It was honing in basically on kind of wider ideas, bringing it down into kind of one big one. So what did you think?
I think it's done exactly what we were hoping it was going to do. So when we were, I guess, vetting people, interviewing people to decide who we were going to work with, we loved Jack's creativity, but we knew that maybe the area he was lacking would be industry knowledge. So we were like, even if we can get us 80% of the way there, then we can add the bits that we want onto it. We're where we want to be. And I think that draft that we received over the weekend was exactly that. I think we're okay to be open, well, transparent as the theme of the podcast as well. What we did is we put that brand story and the taglines and everything like that Jack have been working on next to the agencies that we think that we're out there competing against, and those that we want to mimic in some ways, and the ones that we want to take some of their good stuff and then add our thoughts on top. And it allowed us to see where the gaps were and where we were doing really well with that story. So how we worked it was Brendan, you and I then sat there, wrote out, I guess, our variation on things, and said to Jack, look, between what you have and between what we have, there is something here that is going to absolutely nail what we want to be communicating out to the market. And I think what we found during that part of the process that we went through over the weekend was those with really, really good copy on their sites. They explain what they do in 10 to 15 words, and you know exactly what they're doing. And that's where we need to get to. We've had a crack at it. We're probably pretty close. Jack's now working that up, confirmed via email that he's making some refinements. But I was pretty pleased. What about you?
Yeah, agreed. It kind of tied in. The initial draft had 5 different kind of areas that we could kind of go into to build a brand story. This second draft narrowed that down to kind of 3. And we've already narrowed it that then down into kind of 1 that encapsulates 2 of the 3 themes in what we're saying. So it's a great process because it gets us thinking as well, and it like building this story together. We know what fits us and what kind of we just need that little bit of kind of creativity to help us along. And I also find it quite amazing how George has just been on talking about storytelling over kind of production. That's exactly what we're doing at the minute. We're building our story first for the agency overall, and then moving into the production side of things like new website and stuff. So those little signs show us that we are doing things in the right way, or potentially like the priorities that we're working on are the right things to be working on initially. So it's an interesting process. Jack's going away. I'm excited to see what he comes back with, because once we get that back and we nail that, essentially, it can fast forward all of the other bits and pieces that we need to get going as well. So yeah, I think that's a really good kind of update. I think moving forward to our weekly commitments for the next 7 days. Obviously, for me, I'm going to continue my conversations with the couple of leads that I've been having, just to see if we can get closer to the proposal stage. Target accounts as well. I'm going to try and commit to like an average of 5 target accounts added to the sheet each day of this week. And obviously work with you and Jack on the brand story as well.
Yeah, and that's similar from my side. So target accounts and the incrementality that we spoke about. I'm going to be working on the sales proposal, again, in partnership with you to make sure that that is as good as it can be, ready for next week or the week after. And then the other thing that I have been working on is, I guess, brand identity in terms of the visual side of things. So fonts, logos, color palettes, those kind of things. Been working on that in the background a little bit, ready to share with you in the coming days, Brendan, to get your thoughts on things. So yeah, I'll add that one as well. But as we were speaking about with George, and we speak about here as well, like, it's all about those core pillars: sales, marketing, operations. And I think the big focus for both of us this week is going to be sales.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it needs to be, to give us that confidence to continue on the journey. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap up episode 5. We're well on our way now. We're edging towards the top 20%, if you will. We just need a few listeners. And unless there's anything else from you, Harry?
Nothing else from me.
Perfect. That's us signing out. Swing well, putt true. To help us build our audience, please like, share and subscribe. If you listened on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. And if you watched us on YouTube, please leave a question or comment and we'll get back to you. Thank you.